Have you ever gotten a raise and still felt poorer? Your paycheck goes up, but somehow by the end of the month, there is less left over than before. Sound familiar? That feeling is not in your head. There is a real economic reason behind it. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what is happening and why it affects hundreds of millions of people across the world. Welcome to The Thinking Economist. Let's start with something that seems like it should be obvious. If you earn more money, you should be better off. That is the basic promise of a pay rise. Work hard, grow your skills, get rewarded. And yet, for a huge proportion of working people, that promise has quietly broken down. Incomes rise, but living standards don't. Salaries increase, but the ability to save, invest, or simply get ahead seems to slip further away. Why? The answer starts with understanding the difference between two things that are easy to confuse: your nominal wage and your real wage. Your nominal wage is the number on your payslip, the actual figure your employer pays you. Your real wage is something different. It is what that number can actually buy you in the real world. And this distinction is everything. Because an economy can give every worker a 10% pay rise, and if prices rise by 15% in the same period, every single one of those workers is worse off than they were before. The number went up, the reality went down. Economists call this a decline in real income, and it is one of the most common and least talked about ways that people lose financial ground without ever realizing it. Now, to understand why this happens, we need to talk about inflation. Inflation is the general rise in the price of goods and services over time. A loaf of bread that costs $1 today might cost $1.10 next year. That 10-cent increase is inflation at work. In small doses, inflation is considered normal and even healthy for a growing economy. But when prices rise faster than wages, when the cost of living outpaces what people are paid, inflation becomes a silent thief. It erodes the purchasing power of every dollar, pound, or rupee in your pocket without touching the number itself. Your salary stays the same on paper, but in the real world, it buys less. So why don't wages simply keep up with prices? This is where things get really interesting and a little uncomfortable. The first reason comes down to something called bargaining power. Bargaining power is the ability of one side in a negotiation to get what they want. And in the relationship between workers and employers, that power is rarely equal. Think about it from a practical standpoint. If you go to your employer and ask for a raise, what happens? In most cases, you are one person asking one company. If they say no, your options are limited. Find another job, accept the situation, or try again next year. Businesses, on the other hand, face a much simpler decision when they want to raise prices. They print a new menu. They update their website. They add a line to an invoice. The friction involved in raising prices is low. The friction involved in raising wages is high. This asymmetry, prices moving easily, wages moving slowly, is one of the structural reasons why the gap between the two tends to grow over time. The second reason is the relationship between productivity and pay. And this one is particularly striking. Productivity means how much value a worker produces per hour of work. Over the past several decades, productivity has risen significantly in most developed economies. Workers produce more output more efficiently than at any point in history. Technology has helped. Better tools, better processes, better training. The value being created has gone up. But here is the crucial question: who captures that extra value? In theory, when workers become more productive, they should share in the gains. Higher output should mean higher wages. And for much of the 20th century, that relationship broadly held. Productivity went up. Wages went up with it. But from the latter decades of the 20th century onward, that link began to break. Productivity kept rising. Wages did not keep pace. The extra value created by workers flowed increasingly to shareholders, executives, and business owners, rather than to the workforce that generated it. This divergence between productivity and pay is one of the most documented and debated phenomena in modern economics, and its consequences are felt by ordinary workers every single day. The third reason is the rising cost of specific essentials, and this is where the impact becomes most personal. Even if general inflation is moderate, the costs that matter most to ordinary people have often risen far faster than average. Housing is the clearest example. In many major cities around the world, the cost of renting or buying a home has risen dramatically over recent decades, far outpacing wage growth. A family that could comfortably afford to buy a home on a single average salary a generation ago may now find that two salaries combined are barely enough to cover the deposit. Healthcare is another. The cost of medical treatment, insurance, and prescription medicine has risen sharply in many countries, consuming an ever larger share of household income. And education, the very thing that is supposed to lead to higher wages, has itself become dramatically more expensive in many parts of the world, leaving young people entering the workforce already burdened with debt before they earn their first paycheck. These are not random or accidental trends. They reflect deeper structural features of modern economies. The way markets for housing, healthcare, and education operate differently from markets for ordinary goods. These are things people cannot simply choose not to buy. You need somewhere to live, you need healthcare, you want your children educated. And because the demand for these things is relatively inelastic, meaning people will find a way to pay for them even as prices rise, the prices can keep rising without the market self-correcting the way it might for luxury goods. The result is that even workers whose wages are keeping up with general inflation are often losing ground against the costs that consume the largest share of their budget. Now, let's bring in something that many people do not consider when they think about wages and prices: the role of debt. When real wages fall behind living costs, people do not simply consume less. In most cases, they borrow. Credit cards, personal loans, mortgages that stretch further and further. Debt becomes the bridge between what people earn and what they need to spend. And on the surface, this can mask the problem. People maintain their standard of living. They buy the same things. They keep up appearances. But underneath, the financial foundations are weakening. Debt carries interest. Interest is a cost. And a household increasingly reliant on debt to cover basic living costs is a household moving in the wrong direction, regardless of what the nominal wage figure says. This is why so many people in otherwise wealthy, growing economies describe feeling financially stuck. Earnings rise. On paper, things look fine, but the cost of housing consumes more. Healthcare takes more. Debt repayments take more. And what is left? The amount of genuine financial freedom, the ability to save, to invest, to build any kind of buffer, shrinks. The treadmill gets faster. The gap between effort and reward widens. And the frustration this generates is entirely rational, because it reflects a real economic reality, not a personal failure. So what does all of this mean for you? Understanding the difference between your nominal wage and your real wage is the first step. Knowing that prices and wages do not move together, and understanding why, allows you to make better decisions. To push harder for pay increases that reflect actual productivity, not just inflation. To be aware of the structural forces working against wage growth, and to understand that the feeling of running harder to stay in the same place is not a personal failure. It is a systemic feature of how modern economies tend to operate. Your salary is not the full story. What matters is what it can actually buy, and whether that is growing or shrinking over time. Because in economics, as in life, the number on the page and the reality it represents are not always the same thing. If this video resonated with you, there are 2 more on this channel that go even deeper into the forces shaping your financial reality. In Why Inflation is Like a Hidden Tax, we break down exactly how rising prices quietly take money from your pocket without you ever writing a check to anyone. And in If You're Not Getting Rich, Where is all the money going? We follow the flow of wealth through the economy and explain why so much of it ends up in so few hands. Both are right here. Please like, share, and subscribe to The Thinking Economist, and feel free to share any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions in the comments section.